right? You filthy degenerates. It's that time of year again where I spend way too long compiling all of this tournament data into spreadsheets and then compiling it into pie charts and graphs and then entering it in readable formats into artificial intelligence for it to give me insights on what might be happening at nationals. Now, we had quite a few tournaments going around, right? Pretty big events. We had a full calling, a couple battle hardens, but I like to start with the grassroots of the game, which is Talishar, right? Grassroots is, if I could compile all of the armory data in the world, I would do that, but I can't. So we're going to start. We had a new set come out, obviously, right? So Talishar data is a little bit out of whack, and that would be because a lot of interesting heroes got support. Vincent, very cool. I personally played her a lot. Very fun hero, very interesting, very dynamic, right? Levia, a fan favorite, got a lot of support. Bolton, another kind of one of those sleeper favorites, got a bunch of support. So you have like a lot of new heroes here making up most of the percent of the meta, but you'll see your kind of your staples, I would say, Bravo, Lexi, Dromai, Azuri, Dory, Briar kind of holding up their own percentages while these weird new heroes, Prism, right, kind of take up a bunch of the percentages. So not as correlatable as normal, I would say, because these new heroes didn't have very long to find their feet. So even though Vincent is super popular online, it doesn't really translate to in-person events because she's too new and too hard to figure out, right? All right, so if we look at the best performing decks on Talishar, we are going to see the same kind of story that we've been seeing for a while, right? Briar, Lexi, Dromai, Azalea, Bravo, Icelander, doing really well. You'll notice something very, very, very interesting though, right? Bravo's just this monster on Talishar. He's always winning. He's always well represented. And you'll see some interesting trends coming from him, especially in the future. Then we had a pretty big spike in Icelander, right? And I think no new cards for Icelander, ice cards or wizard cards, that is, but Warmongers is nuts. So since she's probably the most degenerate user of Warmongers, it would make sense why her win rate is skyrocketing, right? Meta's also leaning a little bit more aggressive, right? Bravo's kind of the only hero hanging out up here towards the top that has like substantial amounts of blues and arcane barrier, right? So, kind of your typical post-launch, a lot of aggro decks doing very well. A lot of the solid heroes from before absolutely crushing all of the new decks. You'll notice that win rates are really high compared to normal, but that's because a new set came out with people like Prism at 37% win rate, Vincent at 42, and a million people played Levia at 43% win rates. Same thing happened with Riptide last season. If you didn't watch my last video, Riptide alone was like 29% win rate, which just massively inflated people like Dromai and Lexi, right? So, good decks doing good, right? No real shockers up here towards the top. I would say Dash falling down is kind of interesting to me, right? That's weird, but everybody else is kind of holding where they were. Their win rates up here are just kind of inflated. All right, so we had two Battle Hardens. Battle Harden Chicago, Cincinnati, right? So we'll start with Cincinnati in order of play, right? So typically after a set releases, we have a lot of aggro decks doing very well. And that's because they're just safe. The meta is a little bit weird, right? Oldhim left, so the big bad boogeyman of the ice is no longer with us. So that means that everybody took out their favorite aggro deck, kind of ran with it. So Lexi, Viserai, Bravo, and Briar. Notice Bravo being the only non-aggro deck in the top 50% of the meta, just went out to play, right? And then following behind, you'll have your Dromais, your Azuris, your Katsus, your Dashes, right? Levia getting a little bit of traction here. That's the most represented she's ever been in a tournament up to this date, I believe. So quite well. Quite, a huge surge of Levia and Bolton kind of showing up. And then everybody else falling back to where they normally fall. But you'll notice, look at Icelander right here, right? 2%, and we're going to see some interesting Icelander trends coming very soon. And then we get to the top 8 conversion. Look at Icelander's conversion. 40% of the Icelanders who entered the tournament got in, right? I wonder why. So yeah, very low representation and immediate penetration in the top 8. Briar did pretty well too, 20%. Levia, boom. Not super represented, but not really underrepresented. Made a show in top 8. Azuri, Dromai, Bravo, Lexi. Look at Lexi's pitiful pitiful conversion, right? I mean, there was like a million Lexis, right? So yeah, one made it in the top 8. No shocker, no surprises. Bravo doing pretty well too, right? So no, not really surprising. Just how Icelander showing up in general was kind of interesting, especially with her play rate. And then we look at Chicago, right? The story's evolving slowly, right? Bravo and Levia start getting those like kind of whispers around. It's like, oh well, they're doing better than we thought, and so is Icelander. Boom. Icelander takes down an event. Suddenly people start looking at her again, right? Same thing with with Levia and Bravo. They made top 8 with their new cards. They put on a very convincing show. People brought them, right? A little bit more time to test here. But yeah, Lexi, Bravo, Dromai, Levia making up almost 50% of the entire meta. So Lexi's going nowhere. Bravo's trying to control people. Dromai's throwing down dragons. And Levia's being this new-ish, I would say she's mostly an aggro deck, right? She doesn't really do anything else. So surge of a new aggro deck coming up. And then you've got an interesting surge in Dory, right? Dory kind of coming up. I think this aggro meta is pretty good for her, to be honest. Viserai, Briar, Icelander, Bolton, Vincent actually starts showing up a little bit. Fi, and then everybody else, right? So we're aggro. We're pretty aggro here, right? And then boom. Oh man, top 8. Yeah, 50% of top 8 is Icelander. Ew, right? That's another one ice deck leaves, another one enters, right? So yeah, Icelander shows immensely once again that deck is consistent and able to make it the top 8. 50% of the Icelander players walked in and got a prize, right? Lexi shows up again, 20%. Dromai, 19%. Levia, 10%. So we're continuing to see like one Levia show up, and Icelanders just kind of start rolling in. All right, so if we look at this combined, all of those battle hardens happening at the same time, if you are looking to play at Nationals, you are probably going to see something around this breakdown, right? Probably. And we'll get a little bit more into it later. But yeah, Lexi's, Bravos, Dromais, Viserais, Levias. They're going to be a lot of aggro decks, and then some big bonkin' Bravos, and, Dromai. So it's a pretty hard meta to break through, right? Because there's 3 distinctly different heroes that keep showing up, right? You have a full-on aggro deck that's going to blow your mind, Lexi. You have a control and dominate deck that's going to be there to disrupt your kind of aggressive aggro plans if you're leaning too far into the aggression and not far enough into the defense. And then you have Dromai who's there, who's like, well, if you don't have multiple action points, good luck, right? So really interesting top 8. We can start calling this the Trinity, I would say, based on, we'll see it some more later, but Trinity's starting to form. The 3 heroes who are seeming to do well and seeming to be really high representation, blah, 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 right? And then aggro decks. Dory is continuing to show up quite in strong force, though. It makes sense to me. Dory likes aggro decks. Aggro decks are very apparent right now. Bravo and Dromai being a little harder to beat, but yeah. And then total top 8 conversion, right? Icelander and Briar make up 50% of the top 8. So those 2 decks stand out pretty apparently as like, if you play them, you have a decent shot of making it to the end. Lexi, Levia, Azuri, and Bravo fill in the remaining pieces. Okay, so we know Icelander is just crushing it in all of these battle hardens. Absolutely crushing it in the PTI events, crushing it everywhere. So then we go to the calling. And would you look at it, right? Another Icelander taking down another major event, but we are seeing quite a few of the big bonkin' Bravos up there, right? And you'll notice a very interesting thing happening. There's no Lexis. There's no Lexis, you guys. There's no Lexis in the top 8. Bravo, Katsu, Bravo, Icelander, Azuri, Katsu, Bravo, Azalea. Would you look at that? Nuts, right? So Lexi just didn't seem to be able to make it through the field of anti-aggro control decks, right? She just didn't seem to make it. Warmongers is terrible for her a lot of the time. Bravo got a new card that absolutely crushes her. Azuri had a pretty decent matchup into her already, and then Katsu was fast enough to give her a shot at chasing her down. Couple good combo lines early meant that they could overwhelm Lexi's, aggression, right? All right, so meta percent, right? Lexi, Dromai, Bravo, Briar, making up pretty much 50% of the meta, with Levia sitting right there, making up the final piece. And then Katsu, shown up quite a bit over there in the UK. Icelander shown up more and more because she just won a bunch of events. Azuri shown up pretty decently, and then you're kind of falling in line with everything else, right? All these aggro decks, the Rhinars and all that, always sitting kind of around the same percentages of meta share. And then the top 8. Yep. So Katsu, Bravo, Azalea, Azuri, and Icelander. We already talked about it, right? The Trinity went from being pretty concurrent, right? You see the Trinity, Lexi, Dromai, Bravo, Lexi, Dromai, Bravo, Lexi, Dromai, Bravo, right? The Trinity explodes when it comes to the top 8. Pretty much none of them, right? No, the aggro decks just disappear. So Dromai doesn't make it, Lexi doesn't make it, but Bravo makes it, right? Bravo holding strong. But Bravo also has pretty good game plans into most of these kind of strange decks too. So it makes sense that he was able to hold on a little stronger, right? Like not as disruptible from Azuri or Icelander, or he blocks really well for Katsu, right? So he actually kind of seemed pretty foolproof, right? But this top 8's got a lot of underrepresented heroes comprising it, right? Bravo being the only exception, I would say. Bravo had a high representation at this meta, but yeah, Katsu, Azalea, Azuri, and Icelander weren't exactly like top 5, top 4 picks, right? So let's look at it all together. Let's look at everything, right? So trend will continue through all of these events. Lexi, Bravo, Dromai, and Levia are your top represented decks. You've got the Trinity, Lexi, Bravo, and Dromai, and then a grip load of aggro decks right here, right? Levia, Briar, Viserai, Katsu. And then you kind of have your control decks that show up a little bit. Azuri and Icelander, they're good into these aggro decks. Dory kind of too. And I would say Azalea, even though she's a little bit more on the aggressive side, she's pretty control oriented. So it's your Trinity, aggro, control decks, right? And everybody else kind of falls in the same spot they've always been. But top 8s, 50% of all top 8s are Bravo, Icelander, and Lexi, right? If you want to make it the top 8, play one of these heroes. Now, Lexi, yes, she's a decent chunk of top 8. She is the most represented hero by a lot, right? So a handful of the billion Lexis made it into top 8. Dromai, Briar, Katsu, Levia, Azuri, and Azalea all kind of get their little shows, right? But if you want to convert, if you want to be a converting deck, Icelander, 26%, Azuri, 12%, Bravo, 11, Katsu, 10, Dromai, 8, Azalea, 8, Lexi, 8, Briar, 8, and Levia, 7%. So Icelander is pretty much in a chunk of her own. She owns 1/4 of the conversion pie, right? And a lot of underrepresented decks, Levia, Briar, Azalea, and Katsu doing pretty well, right? And then Lexi's just not converting exceptionally well, right? She's converting at like 7.9%, which is still good. It's just not as overwhelming as like we're used to seeing, right? All right, so another interesting way to look at it, right? So some of the meta, red line, versus top 8. This is one of the first times I have seen it be pretty straightforward where the top represented decks are the ones converting, right? Normally we have a couple outliers over here on this right-hand side. So I think that's interesting. It seems like a lot of people are playing the good decks now, and they're not really, there's no like shocking decks over here on the right. One really notable outcome is that Viserai, even though he is very highly played, just has not converted yet, right? And it's probably Warmongers. The card especially is rude to Viserai. It's probably the fact that, Starstruck is nuts. It's probably the fact that Frostbites hurt him pretty bad unless he's got like a plan for them. But it's probably Warmongers, right? You run into one Warmongers, your turn ends. So yeah, Lexi being the highest played deck with a decent conversion rate. Bravo's got a very, very good conversion rate. Icelander has the best conversion rate, and Azuri, doing pretty good over here next to Katsu. So if you were looking to win nationals or at least get the top 8, I would pick one of these blue lines right now because it's a pretty clear pattern unlike normal. And then my favorite pie graph of all time, the win rates, and it's Icelander. Sick. Okay. All right. So I plugged all of this data in slowly but surely into some AI applications, and we got some interesting responses. So when I first loaded only the tournament data, right, it gave me an immediate response, just kind of showing you guys what kind of things it starts spitting out. But yeah, Lexi's the most popular hero. Least popular heroes are Arachne, Rhinar, and Riptide, right? Makes sense. They're also not doing very well. And then immediately it was like, hey, go play Icelander. Icelander has the nuts conversion rate, and it's the best playing deck, and it's the only one that won. Why wouldn't you play it, right? So that's kind of what it gave me at first. It also kind of hinted a couple times. It's basically saying like Icelander has the best choice probably, and then Lexi seems to be making it, but it's so highly played that it doesn't. Its stats aren't amazing, right? So, and then I loaded all of the Talishar data into it, all matchups, all win rates, all losses, all that kind of stuff. It gave me like 3 pages of notes and stuff like that. But really, the only notable thing it said that wasn't clearly obvious from just looking at the win rates and loss rates and all that kind of stuff was that, again, it was like Lexi is having the highest number of tournaments, biggest percentage, highest win rate, but doesn't win. And it doesn't have that great of it doesn't have the greatest conversion rate, right? So it kind of was saying, hey, like it seems like popularity and win rate don't necessarily correlate to tournament success, which I thought was kind of interesting for it to pick out. And then I was like, okay, I loaded everything up. I gave it all the data and I kind of organized it. And then I was like, okay, predict my next top 8, right? And it gave what we kind of figured. Icelander, Briar, Dromai, Lexi, Levia, Bravo, Azuri, and Azalea are the highest chance to be represented in the next top 8 at nationals. Gave a little bit of a snippet of what it thought about each one, right? Lower win rates versus top 8s, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, very, very interesting. So far, so good on how close it is to the actual statistics below. I like to give it some sanity checks, refresh, sometimes it gets confused, right? And then I said, who is the least likely to win? And it gave me Prism, right? Prism's dead. Sorry, everybody. It said Prism is the least likely to win based on all of the data. But it also, Arachne, Dash, and Rhinar and Riptide don't seem to be doing pretty well. They have low win rates. They have low conversion rates. They have low representation. And it's a sad day for me as a Rhinar player. All right. And then I said, pull me something extra, like abstract from the data. And this is the most interesting one. I have pages and pages of me asking certain questions, doing, kind of prying at what it could pull out for me. But it said, despite being an underplayed hero in the meta, Dash has a very high win rate against some of the popular picks, specifically Lexi and Prism. Okay. But while Dash may not be popular or win overall, seems to be an interesting secret weapon against the popular heroes. This could open up some strategic choices for players. So it's basically telling me Dash is a decent dark horse pick. Interesting, right? Very interesting. So now we know all of this. Let's jump into a very quick tier list, and I will tell you where these heroes sit according to their win rates, loss rates, and meta percentages, and what the AI said. Okay, let's see. Let's get at it. All right, so the easiest place to start would be Icelander, right? Only hero with concurrent winning in every major event since the release of Dusk Till Dawn. Now with multiple people playing the deck, multiple victories at the end, even at the calling, right? She took down a Bravo in the end, which is not an easy task. So yeah, Icelander right now, probably based on the data, undisputed champion, undisputed victories, highest top 8 conversion, highest top 8 representation. Very good deck. Very, very good. And Warmongers really pushes her, I would say, older bad matchups like way over the wall, right? Like such a disruptive card to be able to play on your opponent's turn. It's so crazy that they have to pick War or Peace without looking at their hand, right? That's what really makes it busted. So she's strong. Ice was always strong. I'm pretty sure I remember the developer saying like they didn't have a way to make the cost work. So Frostbites had to be 1, right? They couldn't be like 0.5 or 0.2 or whatever. So I think Frost in general, Ice is just overly strong, right? Because 1 tax in a game like Flesh and Blood, where cards are maximum worth 3, is a lot. So yeah, Icelander is good. And then I think no surprise to anybody, right? Lexi's going to go right next to her at the top. Not a great conversion rate comparatively to these other heroes, but she's still the number 1 played deck. She's still made it in the top 8 the most times. She's still made it into pretty much every top 8 except for Birmingham. Maybe she'll move down to A. Maybe for now we'll just leave A, as a lot of tiers aren't really like that necessary. We're not going to go too crazy with it. And I think really interestingly, right next to her, maybe even ahead of her at this point, is Bravo. Now, Bravo got 1 card kind of. He got 2 cards if you think about it. But he really got 1 card, Starstruck, right? It's a yellow, it hits for 10, and it crushes aggro decks. Now, normally 1 card wouldn't be that much, but Bravo was already pretty good. And Bravo's main problem was like consistency. There'd be certain games where he would just roll you over, and then other games he would kind of struggle to hold on until he could find his combos, or he leaked too much damage, and now taking 10 to do a dominate cripple is no longer an option, right? Starstruck just adds 3 more copies of a card that annihilate you, right? Crippling Crush, Spinal Crush, Starstruck, Crush the Weak, right? Now he has so many options of these really strong cards to throw at aggro decks. And now it's much easier for Bravo to not really have that much of an off turn anymore, right? There was a lot of the time before where Bravo would just, do 1 big attack and like 2 turns of hammering. Also, I think the one-handed Bravo is actually really good. More fatiguing options, more turtley options. Bravo's looking delicious, actually. Okay, we'll start now with kind of some of these easy to put at the bottom tier. Unfortunately, Prism has had no major success so far. Nobody seems to have broken out. I know people are really looking at her. Maybe some cool tech will come out, but right now, she just doesn't have the health, the cards, or the damage to really survive. I'd say same thing with Riptide. What's amazing is Riptide, Bullseye Breakers being banned. Weirdly enough, Riptide like maximized that card almost more than the rest of them did. It was really like kind of a big part of his kit in order to try and have 1 decent turn to not get fatigued. Riptide's gone. Sorry, everybody, but it's true. Arachne being probably at the top of the not doing so great tier list. Arachne's just Azuri, but not as good. Unfortunately, like his hero power is significantly worse than the illusion of surprise with Azuri. Right. I think that's just true. I think that's just going to be how it is. Yeah, so I think these are undisputed the 3 worst decks in the game. Every one of the questions to the AI kind of pointed out these heroes being right there. Unfortunately, Rhinar is right next to them. My favorite hero in the game, my personal deck, as all of you know, there's no chance to survive the blender of day 1 if it holds to be like it was at the Battle Hardens, right? You're talking about like 50% of the meta being Viserai and Lexi. He just can't really make it through that first day, to be honest. Now, if you can survive day 1 in an event like the Calling Birmingham and you make it into that top 8, you're like golden, right? Bravo, easy matchup. I know all the Bravo players at home don't agree, but I played Bravo a lot, and I think it's a Rhinar favorite matchup. Dory, Rhinar favorite, right? Icelander, Rhinar favorite. Now that we've kind of figured it out. And obviously the amount of Dromize, you're going to make it, right? And Azuri, Rhinar pretty much favorite too. So if you could figure out how to survive day 1, you can beat 13 Viserais and Lexis in a row and make it the day 2. Decent choice, but that's unlikely. Bolton hanging out right next to Rhinar. Bunch of new cards. He seems scarier now. He's very fast, very much more flexible, but he hasn't shown any decent results so far, unfortunately. Vincent too. I think this hero has potentially one of the highest ceilings, especially if more support comes out in the future, especially as people evolve her game plan. She seems very strong to me, but she's a very complex hero to play. At one of the events, she went 5-0 and the person had to drop out of the tournament, the Runaways list, if you guys want to go check that out. I personally believe she's strong, but she does have a very fragile game plan where if things go really wrong, and I mean like no generators and you're having to block, you don't really get to fall back on like block 9, play Read the Runes, or block 6, play a rune chain generator, right? So her hero power is very difficult to solve, and I think she'll be here for a little bit longer until like somebody really breaks through with the math, All right. Getting into kind of the next tier, I would say like the B heroes. Fi, no top 8s, no representation. Still a good aggro deck, but much easier to play against than his friend Katsu, right? Katsu being just a stronger version of Fi, top 8 conversion multiple times, high win rate, low representation. So actually doing very well. Both ninjas, I'd say, are decent picks. You'll see like a mixture of like Kadachi Fi versus standard Fi. But yeah, I would say with Fi just getting pushed out of the meta by all these more exceptional aggro decks, he's going to sit a little bit farther down. And Katsu's maybe even up here, to be honest. Probably up there with the best heroes in the game. Viserai having the same similar problem. you know, he can blow you out in one turn. He can do 30 something damage in a turn. And then the next game he gets nothing, all Viscerai hands, Warmongers out, right? He's a good aggro deck, probably better than, better meta percentage than Fi, but no win rates and no top 8 conversion. And I think it's just because these heroes don't let him play the game he wants to play right here at the top. Dash. I'd put Dash right here next to these heroes. Good pick. AI even said it. She has good win rates into a lot of the good heroes at the top, right? Obviously, she can go control into Bravo. She can race down Lexi and Katsu. Has a decent game plan into Icelander. So maybe there just wasn't enough premier Dash players at these events to push her through. I'm not sure, but again, low representation, no real top 8. Levia sitting here up the top for the first time. I asked the AI if I should play Rhinar Levia at Nationals, and I am going to let that decision be who I play. But yeah, Levia has a decent win rate, although almost all of the top 8s come from the same person, similar to Icelander, right, though. But that just proves that it's consistent enough to make it multiple times, right? And we've seen about one at every major event, including the PTI events, sneak their way in the top 8. Granted, they usually crumble up there. They don't really make it past the first-ish round, except for Cincinnati. So she seems good, and I'm excited about it. I've been playing her a lot. I have my own version of her that I'll be sharing soon. Briar, boom, right up here towards the top as well. Briar's had a very high and very consistent top 8 representation. Unfortunately, no wins, because I'd like Rosetta Thorn to go away forever, but it is what it is. Dromai sitting here at the top 2. You can argue above Bravo or below Bravo, I would say. You know, good Dromai players are just freaks of nature. They take a very complex hero, they make it really reliable. They win in even when they're playing against their bad matchups like Viscerai. I've seen some take down Fis and Katsus, right? Granted, I think the surge of Ninja that seems to be showing its head is going to make it very difficult for Dromai. Like, you saw how many Ninjas were in top 8 at Birmingham, which is probably hard for Dromai to deal with. I think Ninja is probably the most oppressive class against Dromai, next to like Viscerai, right? Dory. I think Dory is going to be better over time, especially as they adjust their deck. Dory being like more mid-range does need a little bit of time to adjust their cards, pick the speed that they want to go, the pressure they want to go. And a lot of Dory players, I personally know, Davis I had on the channel before, like, do really well in Icelander. Surprisingly well, right? So she has a decent chance in the Lexi, decent chance in the Icelander. Her real stopgate here at the top would probably be Bravo, right? Bravo could probably put on his shield, tank up, and block everything. But I think this hero next to Dash will probably have the highest chance of breaking up into these higher tiers. You know what I mean? Azuri, definitely. I would have guessed Azuri would have done worse, to be honest, right? This many Dromais to me and this many Icelanders to me means that, like, I wouldn't really want to be on Azuri, but then she shows every single event, does really well. High conversion, high top 8 percentage, low meta representation. The people who play her know what they're doing. So I'd put her somewhere here, maybe here. If it was my gut instinct, I'd put her lower because I think the Dromai and the Icelander matchups aren't that great. But based on the data, right here at the top in the A tier, we have a lot of people in A tier, so we might readjust. Azalea kind of following the same way. Unfortunately, I think Warmongers kind of like bricks Azalea pretty hard. We watched one player, one of the most prominent players of Azalea in the game, just get time walked all the way down until they lost to the Icelander, right? Just absolutely time walked. They didn't get to do anything. It was really it was hard to watch. So, you know, these two heroes seem to be, like, in my opinion, more fragile compare when you play against some of these heroes over here, right? They're just more fragile. Icelander can really time walk Azalea. Dromai and Icelander can hurt Azuri pretty badly. So, you know, I might put them more like this. You know, it's hard to tell because I think Azalea is really good and I think Azuri is really good. But when you play against these heroes in the A tier, it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. But based on stats, you know, they deserve to be up there more, so way more than these heroes here, right? But just to balance it out a little bit, I'll make it look something like this. So right now, based on the data, Icelander, Lexi, Bravo, Dromai, Katsu, Briar, Levia, just crushing it next to Azalea and Azuri. Everybody else down here is not represented. These are the only two heroes in B tier that are represented. Everybody else here has not broken into the top 8 of an event yet. I think Dory and Dash are the most likely, probably right next to Viscerai, because Viscerai can always just have a good day. And I think that if I were to pick a hero down here, it'd probably be Kano. Hope they don't bring AB, Vincent, or Rhinar, because honestly, Rhinar just has a hard time converting in general, but the really good Rhinars like out there do have a good shot into Icelander, Bravo, Dromai, and Leviathan, kinda, right? And then all of this tier. So you're just hoping you dodge these aggro decks day one. All right, everybody. That is the tier list for nationals this season. Obviously, if your region's a little bit different, all regions are different. US leans way more aggressive. Europe tends to lean a bit more defensive. You saw how many Bravos are up there. Keep that in mind. But I would probably pick one of these heroes right here, right? And I'd lean down into this tier. This is probably where my line would stop, right? Dash is probably right around the edge of what I'd feel comfortable playing. All right, you guys, have a great day. Thanks for holding on this long. I hope you guys crush it at nationals. And I hope all of you who play these heroes down here prove me wrong. I hope one of you green boys out there wins with Rhinar. That would be lovely. I'll see you around. Bye.